I just wanted, David's going to ask some questions, but I wanted to say two things before we start. First of all, whenever I get introduced like that, it always sounds like a eulogy. You know, he was a good guy, but he's not with us anymore. So thankfully, I'm still here. And secondly, when you get to go around and travel and speak to people in any walk of life, it would be very easy to start to drink your own Kool-Aid and think, wow, look how special I am. Here I am talking to you. There's nothing special about me. You're all more successful in life than I am. The cars out there are all nicer cars than I own. And so I want you to know that this is humbling for me. I take this very seriously. I'm very appreciative. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts, because my purpose in life is nothing more than messaging. So thank you.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I am David Unn, and I'm one of the two board co-chairs for Street Squash. My other co-chair, Eric Mueller, is here, along with other members of the board. If you all could just raise your hands so we can recognize you, and if you have questions about the organization, we'd be happy to talk to you about them. And of course, John Brisman, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for getting this started 6 years ago. Really are indebted to you and everything you've done for the organization. Let's dive right into it. But first, before we start, just by a show of hands, for those of you who are not familiar with squash, could you raise your hands just so we understand that there are some people who are newer to the game? And okay. All right. So, you know, one of and John references this book. Coach, I think I told you this when we first met, but I have two sons, and they play junior squash, and we read your book a few years ago. And what's surprising to me is I keep on referring to the book in different situations that have nothing to do with squash. I'm sure I'm not the first person who's told you this. But in your first chapter in the book, you talk about this concept of ownership and what it means and why it's necessary for success, and why leaders want to inspire those that they lead to take ownership. What do you mean by ownership, and how does that work?
Well, the concept of ownership, obviously we started talking about ownership in dealing with younger people, right? In our society, I'm very concerned about this generation coming up, because they're not taking enough ownership over their journeys. And we are in part to blame for that, because we'll do anything to make sure that our snowflake never faces adversity. Everything is calm and smooth for them, and so they never fail. And as a result of that, they don't get to learn the importance of stepping up and owning a situation. And I work in a university, in a college now, and they come to us today and they look more put together than they've ever looked before. They present, they're immaculate. And the first time they face adversity, they fall into 1,000 pieces, because they cannot deal with failure, because they've never had to. And in the name of love, we've protected them that much. As a result, we're seeing all kinds of distortional behavior. We're seeing more cheating than I've ever seen before, because the concept of failure, the concept of an F on a paper, is incomprehensible. Well, if you got an F, that's what you should own. You should step up and say, that's my knowledge of the material today, and I need to improve on that. It then goes beyond that. So when people ask me when I'm recruiting, what am I looking for? I'm looking for character large people. I'm looking for people that would do the right thing when nobody is watching. And one of the things I've noticed recently in my life is even leaders at the top oftentimes struggle with the ability to say, "Oops, I made a mistake." And that clarity, owning it, is so critical, I think, to any organization.
You just talked about failure. This idea of managing failure is a skill itself, and on the squash court, on an athletic field, but certainly in a professional context or personal context. Tell us about how you teach the skill and how maybe you practice it yourself. what are some insights you can share on managing the failure?
Well, first of all, failure is critically important to the journey. And we all fail. And we need to celebrate that. We need to allow our children to skin their knees. We need to allow them to fail. Because that's where you learn. You know, when you're going forward and you're successful, you're on to the next one. You know, it could be overtime in the 5th game. You're already thinking about the next one. But when you lose, the train stops. And everybody comes out with their magnifying glasses and what just happened? You know, did we not prepare well? Were we sick? You know, did we get the bus there too late? Or maybe was the other person just better than us? When that train stops, there's your moment to learn. And this is true of everything. If you're managing somebody's money and you make a mistake, you've got to own that, and then you've got to learn from that and make sure you don't repeat the same mistake again. And I find this critically important, and that's all a part of the ownership that we've been talking about. In terms of leading and managing people, your own children, your partner, how you teach the lesson and when you teach the lesson is very important. I've learned this the hard way. Rick Penders, Johnny Smith, Simba Muwadi, Travis Judson. When they would lose, and they didn't lose often, I wanted to go up to them right away and show them how much knowledge I had and start coaching them on what they needed to do better. If I went up to them in the moment, they wouldn't hear a word I said. They're in a temperature, they're so heated up, they're so involved with the moment emotionally that it's falling on deaf ears, oftentimes angry ears. So what I've learned the hard way is to go up to that person and say, we'll talk about this a little later. Come back to them a few hours later. Now they're calm. Now we can talk about the lesson. Now we can talk about what we learned. Timing of that lesson is important. If you wait till the next day, it's already scabbed over and it's too late. To give you an example, my 13-year-old, when she was in childcare, we got a phone, and I didn't think of this, we stumbled upon it, but we got a phone call from childcare, Emma's biting. Ooh. So when I was a little kid, if I bit, my Italian father would bite me and say, see, that hurts. So my mother would stick some hideous substance in my mouth and say, see, biting is not okay. When Emma came home, I realized that if we tried to say something to her in that moment, we weren't going to get anywhere. So I waited till the next day, and at breakfast I said, you know, Emma, it's not cool to bite. Left it alone. A little later in the day I said, you know, Emma, you lose friends when you bite. Little by little, in calm moments, I would address the topic. She stopped biting almost immediately. But if we had tried to do it in the emotion of the moment, nothing would have gotten done. I don't think I answered your question.
You have so many anecdotes in your book that I think are so relevant that we can apply them in different situations. Can you tell us about a situation where someone has come to you and told you that they took an insight from your book and applied it in a context that you just hadn't anticipated before?
Well, it happens quite often. Boy, we're squeaking up here. I feel like I'm at a Led Zeppelin concert, and they're my favorite group, by the way. Lead heads, let's go. But, it does happen because, we're just talking about life lessons in the book. And one of the things that we learned through the book, and so the title of the book is Run to the Roar. So where did that come from? I'm a neurotic mess. I go to a shrink. And he said, Coach, you are really an odd duck. I've never really met anybody like you because I've never met a person who is so conflict avoidant. You will avoid an uncomfortable conversation. It makes you crazy. And yet this weekend, you're going to lead the U.S. team into the Rogers Center at the Pan American Games. in front of 50,000 people. How do you do this? So I'm going to tell you something that I think relates to you. And it's become one of the focuses in our squash and tennis office as we've gone forward. He said, I'm going to tell you a true story, and it's run to the roar. In Africa, lions hunt in packs, and they take with them the oldest female of the pride. By this time, she's old, infirmed, toothless, blind. She can no longer catch her own food, a lot like me. But she has the deepest roar. So if you'll picture this, they position the old lioness in the middle of the field. And then you've got the prey, and then you've got the bush. The other lions hide in the bush. So when she roars, what does the prey do? Run away from the roar, to their death. The message of that anecdote is, go at the problem. It's just a toothless old lady. We make these problems in our minds so big, and we will do anything to avoid just simply going at it, just simply dealing with it. Now, when people come into the office, and I can tell from their body language they're hurting, I'll say to them, okay, what's happening? What are you dealing with? Invariably, it's nothing horrendous. I got my car towed again, and I don't want to tell my father. Or my partner is no longer my partner, but I just don't know how to tell my partner. Things, really life-changing things like that. But at any rate, I'll ask them the simple question, what is the worst that can happen? And when you come to grips with that, it's almost never as bad as you think. And so people will tell me that all the time. I was struggling with this. We have the young men and women make lists. And before they go to bed, I say, take a look at the list for the next day. And on that list, there will be one thing that you least want to do. Do that first. Now the rest of the day is a very pleasant day, but we don't do it. So we're constantly talking about that. I was a consultant for a hedge fund. I don't know the difference between short and long. I could care less. I was their chief perspective officer. And when you're around hedge fund folks, if any of you are out there, please don't be offended, but those people truly believe they have the hardest job in the world. I mean, they'll tell you that straight up. And I was dealing with this group of people, and they said, we have the hardest job in the world. And I was saying, I just had open heart surgery. That person had pressure. And so if you're getting a $10 million Christmas bonus, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to get fired. Okay? Well, if you can command that kind of money, someone thinks you have the skill, the talent, the experience, whatever, you'll get another job. It ain't so bad. But we paint ourselves into this actor in our own story, and we lose perspective. So people come to me with that kind of thing all the time, and it's heartening.
Speaking of perspective, John Brisman was just telling us, and you won't say this, but it bears repeating again, you are the winningest coach in NCAA history, right? So it wasn't just one team one generation of players that allowed Trinity under your leadership to have a nice run. It was year after year after year. Whether you're in, again, athletics or in business or in your personal life, just keeping a good thing going and sustaining it is not an easy thing to do. What are some insights? Like, what are things that you did to keep that train going and to keep the machine humming like you did for so long?
Well, I'm going to end our fireside chat here with an ironic story later. But the irony of this moment is I am the winningest coach in college history. I coach a sport that nobody's ever heard of. It's not like you're sitting here with, Gino Oriema. It's Paul Assaiante, who you need to actually hear a description of because you don't even know who I am. But the thing about it is, and I speak to companies about this, don't focus on the scoreboard. If you focus on the scoreboard, your performance will be lessened. I've never seen an athlete on any athletic field running around with a scoreboard clicker. It's all about people. If you take care of your people, the scoreboard will take care of itself. But if you focus on, this was our third quarter earnings, this is the fourth quarter, this is what we want to earn in the first quarter, I think that just falls apart. Take care of your people. We had a family at Trinity. I look at these men and women, and they're my sons, my daughters, my colleagues. I genuinely believe that. And we just shared the journey. The scoreboard took care of itself. Now, I believe in the Japanese philosophy, which is that you cry in practice and you laugh in competition. So if people would see me on match day, where my job is to take the pressure off of them, you know, to have my arm around Johnny, and everybody would say, what a nice guy, I sure would like to play for him. Well, if you watched our practices, you would not want to play for me. Practices were ferocious. Practices were intense, because that is where the real difference happens. It's very important. It's not hard to get somebody excited on game day. It's how do you get somebody excited on Wednesday when nobody's watching? That's where we put our foot to the pedal. And that's where I believe in the awesome power of now, which is not something I invented. That was Dr. Richard Peck, but, or David Peck maybe. I want them to recognize that every minute in their day needs to be fully engaged in. Really believe in every moment. You know, college students will tell you, you know, Coach, my life is really hard. As a college student, I've got it really hard. Really? You wake up in the morning, you walk up the hill, there are people waiting to serve you food. Then you walk across the field, and you walk into a classroom, and there's some erudite professor waiting to impart knowledge. You come to the squash courts, and you have the greatest coach in the world. So you don't have it hard. Wait till you get into real life. And, you know, they're always talking about that. But what I would challenge them is this. When you go to class, make it the best class you ever went to. Fully engage in that. Sit in the front row. Be prepared. Challenge the professor. You'll get more out of that. When you come to practice, I want it to be the best practice you've ever had. You can do that by how you engage in the moment. When you go to dinner, make it the greatest culinary experience of your life. Chew every bite more times than you've ever chewed before. When you go out on that date tonight, make it the most romantic tryst you've ever had. You can do that simply by engaging in the moment. And when you put your head down on the pillow, you can say, if you take me now, I'm ready, because I had a hell of a day. If you can get one person to buy into that, they're going to have a much better journey. If you can get a team to buy into that, you can create a swirl of energy that simply will not be beaten. When we go down to Yale this year and we play against your son, we're going to believe that on every court, it's 9 against 1. Because that is how engaged we are. We will fall short once every 13 years, but but I believe in that level of engagement. No scoreboard.
Thanks, Coach. I think you can all see why we were so thrilled to have Coach with us. I'm gonna stop with my questions and call an audible here. This court is pretty long, so I'm gonna open it up and see if anyone out in the audience has a question for the coach. Why don't we take 1 or 2 questions, and we can end it on that if anyone has questions. Over here in the front.
I'd like to ask, how do you think squash getting into the Olympics is going to affect
The growth of the game.
Okay, I'll repeat the question.
Okay,
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, how do I think, is it me that's squeaking or you?
You know what? I'll just turn mine off.
Oh, okay. How is getting into the Olympics going to affect our sport? It's going to be very interesting. We're seeing a dramatic impact immediately overseas. China just sent 50 squash players to Egypt to train for the Olympics. Squash centers are exploding all around the world. So the traditional powers, Russia, China, countries like that have always taken the Olympics so seriously, they're really diving in. It's very exciting, actually, to watch. The Olympic Games will be in LA in 2028. Very exciting. I will be the ambassador for the U.S. for that, which, God willing, I'm still here. And it'll be a draw of 32 men and a draw of 32 women. And what they will do is, if you look at the top 32 men in the world right now, probably 22 of them are Egyptian. So obviously, we're not going to have 22 Egyptians in the Olympic Games. So USA will have 3 because we're the host country, and then it'll get sort of evenly spread out. You know, you'll get 2 from France, 2 from England, 1 from Germany, 1 from the Netherlands, and it'll balance it out that way. And so that's really where we're headed in the Olympics. But I think it's a real interesting moment for us because we have to get it right. With the viewing ability, the camera work, all of that needs to be perfect. Because there's only 3 people here that have never heard of squash before. But if, you know, Susie Sunshine is sitting in her house in Brunswick, New Jersey, and she's never seen squash before, and she says, I think I want to try this, and she turns on the channel, if we don't capture her attention quickly, we're going to lose her. And then this becomes a one and done. So I think the pressure is on to get it right. Yes, Simba.
So I have a question about, we're all here for a fundraiser for Street Squash. You've been around the game for, I don't know, whatever, 75 years, whatever it is.
At least.
He's getting back at you.
How do you think that that entire movement has changed over time? What are the lessons we could learn? I think we have people that have been in programs that are here, like playing golf with everyone here, that have gone through programs like Street Squash. So what do you think, where's it come from, where's it gone, and what are the lessons we could learn to get better in the future?
So Street Squash is not the first on the screen. The first on the screen was Squash Busters. And in 1986, my assistant pro at the time was a guy named Greg Zaff. And we were sitting in a steam room at the Appowamus Club, and he said, Coach, I'm going to go back to the Kennedy School, and I'm going to create something called Squash Busters. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide young people with this opportunity to get one-on-one academic mentoring, and we'll use the vehicle of squash to get them in the door. And I told him he was crazy. Don't ever invest with my money. I told him he was crazy. I said, when these kids cycle out, they're never going to find a squash court again, and that's going to be a problem. Why not basketball busters? Why not baseball busters? I was wrong. And the reason I was wrong is you all who have capacity see the value of giving these young people an opportunity to develop academically, athletically. And the thing that I think is understated, but is critically important to what I see, there's tremendous character development through these programs. Better people come out of these programs from environments where they just didn't have the same start that most of us have had. So I think it's been a tremendous thing. A few years ago, we had some hiccups go on, got past that. There are more facilities opening up. Simba's going to be directing a new one down the road. I just think it's all about people, like I said before, and we should give back. And you all are giving back. And I think this thing will continue to go. I pray God it does.
Well, great. On that note, I want to thank.
I got one more story. You got to give me one.
One more story, and
let me humor you with one more story. So I talked about the concept of irony. So I want to end with an ironic story. In 2002, I was selected as the U.S. Olympic Coach of the Year. Do you know why? Because I'm so special. And so the next day I get a phone call from the Red Sox, and they said, how would you like to throw out the first pitch at Fenway? And I said, I can't think of a more deserving person. This is going to be wonderful. So word gets out on campus that Coach A is going to be throwing out the first pitch at Fenway, and the team is going to get their national championship rings, and this is going to be amazing. So I'm walking around campus, kids are saying, hey, Coach, are you loosening up your arm? Are you practicing throwing? 60 feet, 6 inches, I can do this in my sleep. I'm a professional athlete. My daughter at the time was a sophomore at Trinity. So she and her sorority sisters were buying tickets in the bleachers at Fenway Park. Do you know why they were getting tickets in the bleachers? Because they didn't want me to see how drunk they were getting at the game. So the day of the game arrives, the team gets on the bus, we head up to Fenway, and it is the coldest night in the history of Fenway Park. That's important to the story. How many of you have ever held on to a brand new baseball? Very slick, very cold night at Fenway. So now we get out on the field, and this is where I belong. I'm with my peeps. There's Jason Veritek, as big as a house. Kurt Schilling, 6'11". Nomar Garciaparra's forearms are bigger than my legs. You know, this is where I belong. And when they throw the ball, it literally whistles as it goes through the air, and it makes a very loud pop. So the woman running the event comes out, she hands me the ceremonial baseball, Coach Assaiante, squash god. This is great, this is where I belong. So she says, okay, Coach, you're gonna line up on the first base line with all your friends for the national anthem, and then you'll go out and do your thing. Well, I am on the first base line, and it is the longest rendition of the national anthem in the history of man. So by the end of this thing, I am shaking like a leaf, and then it's, ladies and gentlemen, my name is echoing off the green monster. I run out to the mound, 47,000 people in the stands. I look at Jason Veritek. I'm thinking curveball, slider, I don't know, but I'm going to bring the heat. Well, at this moment, my drunk daughter and her sorority sisters start chanting my name. So of course I'm going to wave to the small people, and as I turn to wave, there I am on the big screen TV, 90 feet tall. And it is at that very moment that I realized this is not going to be the best day of my life. I look back to home plate, he's gone. I don't see him. He is literally evaporated. Something is happening to my arm. The ball gets stuck in my hand. I shot put a baseball that bounces 7 times and stops in a mud puddle in front of home plate. Jason Veritek scoops up the muddy orb, brings it out to the mound, hands me the ball and says, nice pitch, Coach. I am mortified, 47,000 people. And as I'm running through the box seats of all these drunk Bostonians, one guy pats me on the toe, says, that's great, U.S. Olympic Coach of the Year. What the hell is squash? So it was not a great night for me. So at any rate, I've thrown out the first pitch 11 more times, but the second time I threw out the ball, Mrs. Assaiante didn't raise the stupid boy. I beckoned to Jason to come a little closer. No, come a little closer. And somehow I got the ball all the way to his mitt. And as I was leaving the field, my cell phone rang, and it was my dear old dad. And he said, son, I am so proud of you. But if that man was any closer to you, you could have handed him the ball. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Coach. And thank you, everyone, for being such a great audience.